3 years ago, we thought the Big 12 would die altogether. Will it exist in the next 10? What is the future of this conference and expansion? This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Big 12. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Thank you for making this show your first listen every single day. Today, we are joined by college football insider Spencer McLaughlin from Locked On College Football to talk the future of the Big 12. We'll also get into, can this conference actually poach teams from the ACC, and will eventually the ACC try to come to the Big 12 to grab new teams? Spencer, off the top here, the future of the Big 12 conference that we thought was dead 3 years ago, is it good? Is it bad? Is the gap too big between this conference and the Big 2? Where do we go?
You know, it reminds me a little bit of the American Conference, not from a caliber standpoint, because it's, of course, above. I know, we're starting right. We're shooting right from the hip. But let me just make that clear. But here's what I mean. Mike Oresco, the now former commissioner of the American Athletic Conference, has spoken very openly about realignment over the years. And I thought he had a very reasoned approach. And what he always said was, look, I understand what this league is. If teams want to leave, as Cincinnati, Houston, and UCF did, I'm not going to stop them. I'm going to make sure that I set up my league for success and get money from them as they go to the Big 12. But I understand there's going to be a transient nature to this conference. It's a place where you can elevate from a previous league, but also go on to another league. There's been a lot of turnover there. And what I thought that showcased was an acceptance of reality and making the best of it and saying, look, we're not going to try and be something that we are not. We're going to pretend that we're a power conference. We're not going to pretend like we're, way better than the Mountain West or anything. We just want to be the best that we can be. And I feel like this applies to the Big 12. You're never going to be the Big 10 or the SEC, but there's going to be, for the foreseeable future, another conference, at least a third conference. And I think the Big 12 largely is just kind of moving in that same sort of mentality where they're just going, hey, we're just going to be the third best conference. Let's create the most stable situation we can. Let's make the best of it. Let's enjoy what we have. Let's go in on basketball because that's a plus for us, and let's also be a good enough football conference where teams don't feel like they need or want to leave. And so I think that's where the Big 12 is at. And look, you said in your open or asked the question, are they going to be here in 10 years? Well, I don't know. I don't know if we'll have any conferences in 10 years' time. That'd be 2034. That'd be post-expiration of the current media rights deals that we just signed and that everybody just, got settled and in some cases haven't even really started yet, or they've barely begun. So you could live in a world with no conferences as we know them right now. But I think the Big 12 feels more stable than the ACC. Does it have as high of a ceiling in football with its programs? No, I don't think so. But does it feel more stable as a league? Yes, I think they absolutely are.
Brett Yormark, who's at the forefront of this now, is a businessman. And to me, someone who's very PR focused. Part of that is putting the conference championship game on the big board in Times Square, or going and playing a game in Mexico that's now been scrapped to focus on other things, or bringing in Nelly for a halftime show. Is being the fun, cool guy conference an admirable approach? Do you like where Yormark's taking this league?
Well, I think it makes the conference identifiable. It gives them a brand, a reputation, identity, and it might not be for everybody. There are clearly going to be fans or even schools writ large that do like those sorts of things and those sorts of moves. And look, the Mexico game, when it first got announced, I didn't have that strong of a reaction to it. I was like, oh, okay. I mean, that's fine. But then hearing they've scrapped it, I've got the exact same reaction, like, okay, whatever. But
yeah,
it's just kind of like, okay, like if you want to do it, fine. But if you don't do it, this is not groundbreaking sort of stuff. This is not dramatically altering the landscape of college athletics in the Big 12. It's just some fun they were exploring. But I think what it demonstrates is his mentality of adaptability. Of, hey, let's try. Let's make an effort. Let's see if this is something that works. And if it's not, you know what, then let's just pull out of it. But I'd rather have somebody who has almost an ADHD nature to him of thinking about how things can improve or how it can get better than someone that just kind of sits around, just kind of watches like, no.
Wait a second. Was that your Bob Bowlesby impression? Very nice. Well done.
I'm shocked that wasn't a Pac-12 reference. But anyway, I just think that Yormark has navigated this space incredibly well and has ensured the conference exists for the next several years and has given it as much stability as he can. And we'll get to, whether or not there will be more, big team moves and realignment chess pieces that continue to move around in a moment. But I think Yormark's mentality kind of fits with what I was talking about in my first point, which is, hey, we are who we are. We can't try to be something that we are not. We have to embrace what we do have, what we can bring to the table, what we do bring to the table, and what we are capable of achieving, rather than, no, we need to have, X national title programs in football, and we got to put 3-4 teams in the playoff. Like, that's not what the Big 12 is right now. That's not what the Big 12 is going to be, with the Big 10 and SEC pulling away from everybody. That doesn't mean the Big 12 can't exist. And the Big 12, of course, existing is a better solution than not existing, as you mentioned, was a thought, as some suggested several years ago.
Existing is better than being dead, which is an eloquent thought that you put together here on Locked On Big 12. Spencer, there is positivity in the Big 12 realm, more so than there is in the ACC. And part of that is the thought this conference has gotten to the eclipse where they can go and pick up new teams from the Atlantic Coast Conference. Let's go there next. Is that a real feasibility here on Locked On Big 12, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day? Today's show is brought to you by Game Time. This weekend, I'm going to see the Dallas Stars play whoever they're playing, some random team from Canada. I'm not the biggest Dallas Stars fan in the world, but I like live hockey. You might not like live hockey. It's probably because you haven't been to a live hockey game. Going to that game is great. I have tickets, right? No, I don't. I'm going to buy them last minute for like $45 from Game Time. Everybody, right now, Game Time is your spot for last-minute deals to save 60% when you buy tickets last minute for sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. They have flash deals to make you save more with exclusive in-app deals. All-in pricing, toggle that feature. No crazy fees at the back end of your buying experience. You can see it all right there in front of you. Seat views, a panoramic view from your seat. That's what Seat View means in the app before you buy, and a lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So right now, download the Game Time app. You're buying NBA Finals tickets, NHL tickets, create an account, use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, and that is guaranteed. Spencer McLaughlin of Locked On College Football with us. Spencer, the entire idea for the Big 12 is, how do we get to 20? How do we bring in more teams to make this league more profitable because of the look-in that Brett Yormark fought so hard for with the college football playoff? Let's reassess in a couple years and see the value of this league. To become more valuable, you need more power brands. Is there a legitimate possibility the Big 12 actually does pull ACC teams into this conference?
Well, if the ACC disbands, yes. I don't think the Big 12 is going to be able to pull ACC teams if only Florida State and Clemson leave. Yep. I think North Carolina is the key, and I've talked about this on my show. I think they are the key to the ACC's long-term viability. Yeah.
Clarification-wise, when you say disbands, does that mean those top three brands are gone? So the league itself, it still exists, but everybody knows, hey, we've got to look for a second option.
I think what you could see is a Pac-12 style disruption. Yeah. If FSU and Clemson leave, that would be the equivalent of USC and UCLA making that move.
Yep.
There was still a plan. It didn't come to fruition. There was still a plan to have a league without them in it. And even without Colorado, it was going to be San Diego State as the 10th team. Then maybe they would have expanded further down the line. But that was the plan. I think the ACC can succeed in that plan if and only if they keep North Carolina around because North Carolina has got legal ties to NC State. So they're essentially a package deal is my understanding, is that you're not going to be able to pull North Carolina without bringing NC State along for the ride for what has been dubbed by, I forget who it was, the Wolfpack Backpack, which is pretty good. I think Miami is important too, but think about the state of North Carolina. If UNC is tied to NC State, you also have 2 other ACC schools in the state of North Carolina, and one of them is Duke. And look, there's a lot of craziness in realignment. The fact that Oregon and Maryland are in the same conference is wild. That is a wild concept in college athletics. There are still some things that have held to continue to be true. Oregon and Washington, USC, UCLA moved together. Oklahoma, Texas moved together. Can anyone actually see North Carolina and Duke not being in the same conference? Because I just can't. I cannot see that taking place. And that's, suspicion on my part. Maybe there'd be a legal way around it. But that means North Carolina could be worth up to 3 schools themselves, NC State and Duke as well. And then I don't know what would happen with Wake Forest, or if they're a big player. I don't think they really are in the ACC landscape. They have some Big 12 vibes to them over there in Wake Forest. But I think that if you keep North Carolina in the ACC, I think you could then keep Miami, you keep Duke, you keep NC State, and I think that league is good enough to continue. It's not as good as you'd like it to be if you're Jim Phillips, but it's good enough. So if that plan unfolds, I don't think there is a big incentive for Pitt or Louisville, who would be probably the top Big 12 targets and fits. I don't think there's a big incentive for them to leave the ACC for the Big 12. Now, maybe there'd be a financial renegotiation of the media rights contract without FSU and Clemson, and that would create a larger financial disparity, and they would consider it. But the money, correct me if I'm wrong here, Drake, is not going to be more going from the ACC to the Big 12. And the more teams you add, the more that payout from the conference gets diluted a bit, especially if they're not additive programs, which most, frankly, are not in college sports. So that's why I'm skeptical on the ACC teams getting there. If North Carolina leaves the ACC, though, if FSU and Clemson get out, North Carolina decides we want to do that too, and they take anybody else with them, then you could see NC State. You could see Louisville and Pitt go, all right, let's find a home, and then the whole thing could fall apart. But if North Carolina stays and you just lose FSU and Clemson, I think that league can continue.
A lot of it contingent, to me at least, on February 2025 when ESPN decides what they will do with the future of the conference past 2027. I think there are schools that will wait for that date past Florida State and Clemson, who already seem hell-bent on what they'll do to figure out their next move. Spencer, you mentioned a Louisville, a Pitt. What about Virginia Tech? Who else sits there? You say, you know what, you mentioned Wake Forest, like that Big 12 vibe.
Big 12 vibe. I mean, there's something about Syracuse and that orange dome.
Boy, you are not making anybody happy right now. Like, I'm looking for the Virginia Tech, or maybe an NC State becomes a straggler, or
NC State. I'm mostly operating off of just kind of vibes here, but also who would be able to geographically, they're all about the same,
right?
But if you're talking, the Big 12 and who suddenly fits in that conversation, what were we talking about with Brett Yormark earlier? That he's a guy that, is willing to try stuff, wants to be a little bit new, wants to be a little bit standout, cutting edge. I like Syracuse's dome. If they could ever get good at football, they get a new head coach. They got Kyle McCord in at quarterback. If they ever got good, I think that could be kind of fun. I don't think they'd be at the top of the Big 12's wish list. I think Louisville and Pitt would be the top 2 schools, because Pitt, West Virginia being a game that gets played as a Big 12 conference game, I think that's too good to pass up. That's one of the best rivalries in all of college sports, whether people are acutely aware. Certainly on this channel, they have to be aware of the backyard brawl and how utterly fantastic of a rivalry is. That's a great encapsulation of why college football is great. Those are two programs that in my lifetime have not really sniffed national relevance consistently. There have been flashes, there have been moments, but they've overall been middling. But when those two teams play, it feels like the gosh darn Super Bowl, Drake. It feels like everything in the world is on the line in that game. So I think that'd be one. And then Louisville, geographically, is a little bit closer to the Big 12, and also, historically, they have been really, really bad, but they have historically been a very good basketball team. And that is not something that they've succeeded at lately. However, we know that Brett Yormark enjoys a good basketball schools, and Big 12 is the best basketball conference in the country. I was burned in my March Madness bracket for acting that way in making my selections, but you know what? No regrets, right? With the A on the neck and the tattoo, everything like that. Yeah, none of that. So, yeah, I think Virginia Tech would be the next team that you'd like to pick up if you're the Big 12. Either Virginia Tech or NC State. You can make the argument either way. I mean, you have to think about if you're the Big 12. What are you looking for, right? I don't think the television numbers are that big, but I don't think there's much of a difference between Virginia Tech and NC State.
And they're not near as big as they are between Washington State, who is one of the biggest TV juggernauts that existed in the Pac-12. Like, shockingly good, better than most Big 12 schools who are still off the table. So,
they pull the Seattle market more than I think a lot of people realize. And the Seattle television market is fairly sizable. Now, Oregon State, less so, because there are not as many people in Oregon, so you don't have as many television eyeballs there. But, yeah, I mean, we were just talking ACC schools. If we want to talk the still technically existing Pac-12, like that's an entirely different conversation. But, yeah, I think if you were going to go, like Pitt also feels like a more logical travel partner with Louisville. I would think like that pairing would seem to work. But then your next two, probably NC State and Virginia Tech, based on the geography, the location, and the brand of those schools.
Love it. Up next, can the ACC poach the Big 12? That is a silly question that might not be so simple. This is Locked On Big 12. Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On College Football. This week, Dick Weiss, I've got to be honest, shoot straight, man. I hadn't really heard of the guy. Apparently, College Football Sports Writer Hall of Fame, said that Utah could be in conversations with the ACC, joining the Atlantic Coast Conference and skipping out of the Big 12. Then from Brett McMurphy, Utah releases a statement and says that's complete BS. Is there a world in which Jim Phillips gets on the phone and says, hey, you guys, we could build a really good power thing over here. Come play with us. Could the ACC ever poach the Big 12?
If Jim Phillips doesn't try, he's not doing his job. That doesn't mean he would be successful. Right now, there is no way it would make sense for Utah to go to the ACC. What are you going to? What are you thinking about? Like, what is over there that is desirable at the moment? Now, here's where the interesting side of it could come into play for Utah specifically. I don't think it is a secret to the listeners and viewers of this show that Utah never really wanted to join the Big 12.
Right.
They were forced to do that.
Which is not a bad thing. I mean, there was loyalty to the conference that made them a power brand.
Yeah, and they wanted that league to continue. Once Oregon and Washington left, they realized this is not tenable. We need a stable situation, and that was the Big 12. And Brett Yormark wisely said, welcome in. Please don't win our conference too quickly or people might get upset. I think that's going to happen anyway, whether Big 12 fans want that to or not. So I think that for Utah, like culturally, are they a fit in the ACC? Yeah, actually, if you look at the academic standings of ACC schools and where Utah fits in that conversation, yeah, I think they kind of work. The size of the school, the television viewership they could bring in.
Work more than the Big 12, though, considering like the old TCU rivalry, bringing Arizona with you. I mean, is there? I mean,
that depends on how you define work. I think Utah can fit in the Big 12 just fine. I think geographically, with Arizona schools and Colorado coming with, it's now a very logical expansion piece. It would be another West Coast element for the ACC to add. And remember this, kids. Stanford and Cal are, wait for it, ACC schools now. And that hasn't been made official. But, July 1st, 2024. I know. Isn't that wild? The Bay Area. That's they're in the ACC too. So the ACC has branched out a little bit. So if your argument is, well, then no, that's too far away. That's not even the furthest state away that they have gone into. Not even close, Frank. I mean, it's technically close. Utah to California is not incredibly far, but it's also, more than a 10-minute walk down the road. So I think that for the ACC, if they were to lose FSU and Clemson, but keep everyone else around, going after Utah could make plenty of sense. I don't know if Utah would want to do that. They could view that, like at that point for Utah football, they would have to examine which league puts us in a stronger position.
Right.
What is a better football league to be in, factoring in that Utah itself is a very strong brand. And if Utah went into the ACC, they'd be one of the top 3 or 4 teams. Utah in the Big 12, they're one of the top 3 programs in the conference right now.
Front row question.
Yes.
Yeah, Spencer, Drake Toll, Locked On Big 12. We talk about the strength of the ACC in football. A lot of the pushback you'll get, I can see the comment right now, somebody's screaming, is that Florida State, undefeated, gets left out of the college football playoff. Does that mar how you view the ACC from a football standpoint?
No, I don't think it should. That was the 4-team era. This is the 12-team era. And those are completely different landscapes to navigate. And I think if you just look at the depth of good to very good teams or programs, really, over the last 5-10 years, you have a good lineup in the ACC, even without Florida State and Clemson. Can you make the argument that the Big 12 is better? Yeah, you can. I don't think the gap between the two is as big as Big 12 fans might like to think. And if you remove Utah from that equation, now you are... I cannot say I've done a side-by-side comparison, but we can just come up with it off the top of our heads here. You'd have now. I don't think North Carolina is going to have Mac Brown for that much longer. That's at least a capable program. Mario Cristobal down at Miami, though, recruits his rear end off and has an ACC and playoff contender this season. Should be able to continue having that down there in Coral Gables. So you'd have Florida, or you'd have Miami. You would have Utah, you'd have a North Carolina in the mix. Virginia Tech is on the rise. NC State is a really good program. Could a Georgia Tech continue to elevate and get themselves back to a higher level?
Like an Arizona, who at least has pieces to be good, and they might be the back end as far as trajectory goes, to a Kansas State, to a Texas Tech, to a TCU just went to the college football playoff, granted a bad year last year. And that's not to mention Iowa State that has, this prowess in Matt Campbell, and West Virginia has a whole lot of returning power. And Kansas now under Lance Leipold is good all of a sudden. I mean, you've got a depth of 7 teams in the Big 12 to compete for a title this year.
I think the depth in the Big 12 is stronger than any other conference in the country in terms of how many teams can win the conference championship.
It's not shocking. The SEC, it's 3, and the Big 10, it's 3.
The SEC, it might be more than 3. Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ole Miss. Yes, I put Ole Miss in that conversation.
I think it's Georgia, Texas that can win the conference.
Oh yeah, I can't forget about Texas. You know how often I forget that Texas is in the SEC.
Did you not know that? That's a recent thing.
Well, I see. It's like I knew it. I was driving to the Mariners game yesterday. And I was picking up my cousin, aunt, and uncle, and I was driving to their house, and I remember the way to get there. I just kind of forgot briefly, so I missed a turn. That's Texas being in the SEC. So I think you got 5 teams that I'd say are capable of winning the SEC. I didn't even mention Missouri, which is a complete and total wild card. And Missouri, FanDuel thinks Missouri's very good. Missouri with a win total of 9.5. If you said that 5 years ago, you would have said, "Hey, I didn't know Missouri went back to the Big 12." No, Eli Drinkwitz just did a really good job, and he's got some pieces coming back. But yeah, I think the depth in the Big 12 is tremendous, but it might be a touch better than the ACC. If you remove Florida State and Clemson, the caliber of conference championship capable programs is probably a touch stronger in the Big 12, but that gap lessens if Utah were to move over there. Yeah. If they were to take somebody else over there with them as well. And I don't think that gap is huge. I think it's there, but I think it's smaller than the gap that the ACC and Big 12 are facing compared to the Big 10 and the SEC.
So if I can, the thesis of the ACC currently, with its current stability, is not possible they're going to poach Big 12 teams. But given that North Carolina stays, the future seems bright. They have more of a chance to make a move like that.
Yeah, I would think so. If they keep everybody but FSU and Clemson, then they could try to go on the offensive. And I think they should try to go on the offensive if they lose FSU and Clemson, because Stanford, Cal, SMU, that's a move you made because it was available. Those are not power players in college football. Now, SMU is kind of a wild card because SMU is so wildly committed to being great in college athletics that they have quite literally just bought their way into the ACC,
pay the bill.
Which once upon a time was thought of as a ridiculous notion. Clearly not, because they're saying we'll take $0 and we will fund the athletic department. Like SMU taking $0 in media rights revenue still probably has a top, at least top half, but maybe top 4 or 5 overall athletics budget in the ACC right here, right now, today. I think they've got more than Cal and Stanford. I think they have more than a lot of other schools as well. Like, they have got deep oil money pockets, and they want to be good at sports. And look, I respect them for it, because I think every college town should be like that. I think every college should be like that. Like I'm biased, of course, because I like sports a lot, but it baffles me.
Dallas a college town? God bless. Put the gun down, man. Throw the shovel away.
I did. I guess I did do that. Here's okay, Drake. Think about it like this, though. Every town can be a college town as long as there's a college in it without being a college town. You know what I mean?
Ooh.
The potential is there if you just have
eloquent
what SMU has, which is a top 5 NIL collective valuation, and they have not played a single conference game at the power level this century, and yet they have a top 5 NIL collective.
For the people that are Leonardo DiCaprio pointing at the television set and going, I know that guy. They remember you. Where can they find more of your work?
I am on YouTube hosting Locked On College Football, which is also available wherever you get your podcast, wherever you may be listening to this show. And if you want everything you need to know about the Oregon Ducks, because your team may be playing them one day, you can check out Locked On Ducks on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts as well. And for those who may be interested, I also do play-by-play for Southern Utah University, which is, I love doing these shows, and I go back and forth on which one I enjoy more, but I enjoy it all tremendously. And that's the body of work that I got rolling. And it's not bad. It's not bad.
Come back tomorrow. We're going to talk more, possibly expansion. Maybe. We'll see. Right here on Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Thanks to Spencer McLaughlin for joining the show. Dose Grande.